Distraction is one of the most effective tools used to keep people from alignment because it rarely looks dangerous. It looks harmless, reasonable, even justified. People don't usually drift away from purpose through rebellion. They drift through comfort. They slowly allow things into their lives that demand attention but offer no direction. Over time, these distractions become attachments, and attachments quietly take the place of discipline. Attachments are not always sinful or obvious. Often they are people, routines, habits, or environments that once served a purpose but no longer align with where God is leading you. What makes them dangerous is familiarity. Familiar things feel safe, and safety can make disobedience feel responsible. You stay connected because it's easier than explaining change. You remain involved because leaving would feel uncomfortable. But comfort can be the enemy of growth when it keeps you anchored to a season that has already ended. Every attachment consumes something: time, energy, focus, emotional capacity. When those resources are being drained by the wrong sources, spiritual sensitivity weakens. Prayer becomes rushed. Discernment dulls. Conviction becomes negotiable. You still believe, but you stop listening closely. This is how alignment is lost without a dramatic failure. Not because you stopped caring, but because you allowed too many things to speak into your life at the same volume as God. People often resist releasing attachments because they fear loss. They think letting go means emptiness, but what they don't realize is that holding on to what God is asking you to release creates a blockage. You cannot receive with hands that are already full. God never removes something without intending to replace it with something better aligned to your purpose. But replacement requires space, and space requires release. Distraction also distorts priority. You begin responding to urgency instead of direction. What screams loudest gets its attention, even if it isn't important. Meanwhile, what matters most is neglected because it doesn't demand immediate response. This is how prayer gets postponed, rest gets ignored, and obedience gets delayed. You don't refuse God outright. You simply keep him waiting. Over time, waiting turns into distance. Certain relationships can also drain alignment, not because they are evil, but because they pull you backward. People connected to your past may not have access to your future. Remaining emotionally tied to them can create internal conflict. When God calls you forward, you feel torn between obedience and loyalty, between growth and familiarity. This tension often results in compromise, where you partially obey while maintaining connections God already signaled to outgrow. Environment matters more than most people admit. Where you spend time influences how you think, what you tolerate, and what you normalize. Remaining in environments that no longer support your growth weakens your resolve. You adapt to what surrounds you. When God calls you higher, remaining in low expectation spaces slowly reshapes your standards downward. The longer distractions and attachments remain unaddressed, the harder they are to release. They become normalized. You start defending them. You explain them away. And what once felt optional begins to feel essential. This is why God speaks urgently when alignment is at risk. He is not trying to take joy from you. He is trying to remove what is draining life from you. Release is not rejection. Letting go does not mean failure. It means obedience. Alignment requires intentional separation, not from people, but from influence. When distractions are removed, clarity returns. When unhealthy attachments are released, strength is restored. Alignment is not achieved by adding more. It is often restored by removing what does not belong. Realignment is not a dramatic moment. It is a decisive one. It begins when a person stops defending where they are and starts responding to where they are being led. Most people wait for circumstances to force change, but realignment happens when you choose to move before pressure makes the decision for you. It is an internal shift first. Quiet agreement with truth, followed by visible action that brings life back into order. When realignment happens, clarity returns quickly. Confusion lifts, not because every question is answered, but because direction is restored. You begin to recognize what matters and what does not. Distractions lose their grip. Decisions feel lighter. This is not coincidence. It is the result of alignment bringing you back into proper position. Just as alignment in the body restores function, alignment in life restores flow. Protection is one of the first things reactivated through realignment. Not immunity from challenges, but covering from unnecessary damage. You still face resistance, but it no longer drains you the same way. Situations that once overwhelmed you now feel manageable. This is because alignment places you back under the guidance and boundaries designed for your growth. You are no longer fighting battles you were never meant to fight. Realignment also restores sensitivity. You become more aware of what strengthens you and what weakens you. Discernment sharpens. Conviction returns without condemnation. You begin to sense when something is off before it becomes destructive. This awareness is not fear-based, it is protective. It allows you to adjust early rather than recover later. Momentum follows alignment naturally. Effort becomes effective again. Doors begin opening without strain. Conversations align. Opportunities feel timely rather than forced. This is not luck, it is positioning. When you are aligned, you stop pushing against resistance that obedience would have removed. Energy is no longer wasted, and progress feels sustainable rather than exhausting. Destiny is not activated by ambition, it is unlocked by obedience. Many people chase purpose through effort while ignoring alignment, but destiny unfolds where obedience places you, not where desire pushes you. When you realign, you may not see immediate results, but you regain direction, and direction always leads to destination. Realignment also stabilizes identity. You stop measuring yourself by comparison or performance. You become grounded in assignment. This reduces anxiety and restores confidence. You no longer need external validation because internal alignment confirms your direction. This is how peace and purpose coexist. Timing is restored through realignment as well. Delays begin to make sense. Seasons that felt confusing gain meaning. You understand that some things did not happen earlier because alignment was still forming. When realignment occurs, timing accelerates, not rushed, but synchronized. Things happen when they should, not just when you want them to. Most importantly, realignment preserves what God has connected to your future. When you move back into position, what was at risk becomes guarded. what was fading begins to strengthen. This does not mean everything becomes easy, but it means everything becomes intentional. Nothing is wasted. Even past mistakes are repurposed as wisdom. Realignment is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to who you were meant to be. When you realign now, you don't just protect your present, you secure your future. Alignment is the gateway through which protection flows and destiny unfolds. Many people assume that when God tests them, the test is about endurance, intelligence, or strength. They believe the pressure they feel is meant to see how much they can handle or how long they can survive. But often the test is far simpler and far more revealing. It is a test of obedience, not dramatic obedience, not public obedience, but quiet, private, uncomfortable obedience that requires trust more than effort. Obedience becomes most difficult when it costs comfort. God rarely tests people when obedience is easy. The real test comes when obedience disrupts routine, challenges relationships, or threatens stability. In these moments, strength alone is not enough. You can be strong and still resist instruction. You can be gifted and still delay obedience. This is why obedience, not strength, is the measure. Strength can push through pain, but obedience surrenders control. God often tests obedience in areas that seem small, a conversation you are avoiding, a habit you've been justifying, a step you've been postponing. These moments don't feel monumental, which makes them easy to dismiss. But small acts of obedience reveal the condition of the heart. If you resist in the small, you will struggle in the large. God knows this, which is why he watches response, not appearance. Another reason this test is difficult is because obedience can isolate you. When God instructs you to move differently, speak differently, or choose differently, not everyone will understand. Obedience may separate you from familiar circles, accepted behaviors, or comfortable environments. This isolation can feel like loss, even when it is actually protection. Strength seeks approval, obedience seeks alignment. There is also a temptation to delay obedience under the disguise of wisdom. People tell themselves they are waiting for clarity. When clarity has already been given, they say they are praying about it. When instruction has already been confirmed, this delay is not patience, it is avoidance. God does not test obedience by overwhelming you with confusion. When he tests, he makes the instruction clear enough to require a decision. Obedience also challenges pride. It forces you to admit that your understanding is limited, that your plan may not be best. That surrender is sometimes wiser than strategy. This is why obedience feels vulnerable. It removes the illusion of control and replaces it with trust. And trust is uncomfortable for those who rely on certainty. Strength can perform. Obedience transforms. Strength can impress others. Obedience aligns you with God. This is why some strong people remain stuck while others with less ability move forward. Progress is not powered by capacity alone. It is powered by compliance with direction. God can work with weakness, but resistance limits movement. In seasons of testing, God is not asking for perfection. He is watching posture. Are you willing to move when he speaks? Are you responsive when correction comes? Are you flexible when plans change? Obedience is revealed not by how loudly you declare faith, but by how quickly you adjust when instructed. This test is temporary, but its outcome is lasting. Obedience now determines access later. What feels like a small decision carries long-term impact. God is not trying to see how much you can endure. He is revealing whether you are willing to trust him when obedience costs you something you would rather keep. What many people misunderstand is the difference between being chosen and walking in access. Calling is given, but access is maintained. Favor can rest on a life, but it must be stewarded. God does not revoke purpose easily, but he does require responsibility in order for blessings to remain active. This is why obedience is not optional when it comes to preservation. What God gives freely still requires discipline to keep. There is a false belief that once something is given by God, it cannot be affected by human response. This leads people to treat instruction casually. They assume grace will cover delay, compromise, or partial obedience. But grace is not permission to ignore direction. It is empowerment to follow it. Favor opens doors, but obedience determines how long those doors stay open and what happens once you walk through them. When God gives instruction, it is not meant to restrict you. It is meant to protect what he has already placed in your hands. Obedience functions like a boundary around blessing. Without boundaries, even good things become vulnerable. Talents without discipline burn out. Opportunities without integrity collapse. Influence without obedience becomes dangerous. God understands this, which is why he speaks clearly when something valuable is at risk. Many people lose blessings not because they were unworthy, but because they were unprepared to maintain them. Obedience develops the capacity to hold what favor attracts. Without it, promotion becomes pressure, success becomes stress, and visibility becomes exposure. God would rather slow you down than allow what he gave you to destroy you. That slowing is often instruction, and ignoring it removes the safeguard. Obedience also keeps you aligned with timing. Being early or late can be just as damaging as being disobedient. God's instructions often involve when, not just what. Missing timing doesn't cancel promise, but it alters experience. What was meant to be peaceful becomes frustrating. What was meant to be joyful becomes heavy. Obedience preserves not only the blessing, but the way the blessing is experienced. There is also a relational aspect to obedience. God values partnership, not control. He invites response, not automation. When instruction is followed, trust deepens. When it is ignored, distance grows, not emotionally, but functionally. Communication becomes harder to discern. Direction feels less clear. This is not because God stopped speaking, but because alignment makes hearing easier. Obedience is proof of trust. It says, I believe you see what I cannot. That belief activates protection. When God sees obedience, he guards what you're building. When obedience fades, protection weakens. Not because God is angry, but because you've stepped outside the covering designed for your growth. Just as stepping outside shelter exposes you to weather, stepping outside instruction exposes you to unnecessary strain. It is important to understand that God does not force obedience. Forced obedience would cancel free will, and free will is essential to relationship. He opens doors, gives warnings, sends confirmation, and provides clarity, but the choice remains yours. That choice determines whether what he has given multiplies or slowly diminishes. Preservation requires participation. Obedience is how you participate in what God is doing. It keeps you in position, keeps you sensitive, and keeps you protected. Without it, even good intentions can lead to loss. With it, even difficult seasons become productive. Obedience does not just secure blessings, it sustains them, guards them, and ensures they fulfill their purpose rather than fading before their time. This is not a random moment, and it is not something you happen to stumble across by accident. There are times when life feels loud, filled with opinions, distractions, and endless voices competing for your attention. But there are also moments when one message cuts through everything else and settles deep in your spirit. This is one of those moments when God speaks directly. He does not need to shout, and he does not need to entertain. His voice carries weight because it is intentional. What you are hearing is not emotional manipulation, fear-driven urgency, or coincidence. It is alignment. It is heaven interrupting your routine to get your attention before something important shifts. Many people wait for dramatic signs before they believe God is speaking. They look for thunder, miracles, or undeniable proof. But often God speaks through timing, repetition, and inner conviction. The fact that this message reached you now in this exact season of your life is significant. You could have been anywhere else mentally or emotionally, yet here you are. That alone should tell you something. God knows how to reach his own, and when he does, it is because something ahead requires preparation. He does not interrupt without purpose. This message is direct because clarity is necessary right now. Ambiguity would be dangerous. When God speaks clearly, it means delay carries consequences, not punishment, but loss of opportunity. There are moments when grace allows time, and there are moments when instruction demands response. This is one of those moments where neutrality is not an option. Ignoring what you sense, feel, or recognize in your spirit does not stop the message from being real. It only stops you from benefiting from it. There is a reason this message feels personal. God does not broadcast warnings to entertain the masses. He speaks specifically to those he intends to move. When you are chosen for greater responsibility, you receive greater clarity. This is not favoritism. It is preparation. God does not whisper to confuse you. He speaks to position you. And when he sends a direct message, it is often because something familiar is about to change, something comfortable is about to be challenged, or something hidden is about to be exposed. Some people mistake conviction for fear and dismiss it. Others mistake urgency for pressure and resist it. But divine urgency is not meant to paralyze you. It is meant to awaken you. It is the difference between drifting and deciding. God sends direct messages to bring alignment before loss, correction before damage, and clarity before confusion. When he speaks now, it is because waiting longer would cost more than responding today. This moment is also a reminder that God is not distant. He is attentive. He sees what you are struggling to admit, what you have been avoiding, and what you've been hoping would resolve itself without change. A direct message means he is involved, watching, and invested in the outcome of your obedience. Silence would be easier. Distance would require less from you. But engagement means he believes you are capable of responding correctly. There is also responsibility attached to being addressed directly. When God speaks generally, people can hide in the crowd. When he speaks specifically, accountability increases. You are not being targeted for destruction. You are being called to attention. This is the kind of moment that separates those who hear from those who respond. Hearing alone changes nothing. Response is what unlocks movement. The danger is not in misunderstanding the message, but in pretending you didn't hear it. Many losses in life are not caused by ignorance, but by dismissal. God does not always repeat himself the same way twice. Sometimes the first message is gentle, the second is urgent, and the third is silence. That is why recognizing this moment matters. This is an invitation to align before things shift, to listen before circumstances speak louder, and to respond while the door is still open. Loss rarely announces itself loudly at first. It does not arrive with alarms, dramatic moments, or sudden collapse. Instead, it comes quietly, almost politely, slipping in unnoticed while life continues on the surface as usual. This is why ignoring divine instruction is so dangerous. When people think of loss, they imagine instant failure or obvious consequences, but spiritual loss works differently. It unfolds in stages, each one subtle enough to be explained away, until what once felt solid becomes unstable. The first thing that begins to fade is peace, not happiness, not success, but peace. You may still be productive, still busy, still achieving, yet something feels unsettled inside. Decisions that once felt clear now feel heavy. Rest becomes difficult even when your schedule allows it. This is often dismissed as stress or fatigue, but in reality, it is misalignment. When God gives direction and it is ignored, the inner harmony between your spirit and your actions begins to fracture. After peace fades, clarity starts to blur. Vision becomes cloudy. You second guess choices you once felt confident about. Opportunities come, but you are unsure which ones to take. Discernment weakens. This is not because God stopped guiding, but because guidance was previously resisted. Ignored instruction dulls sensitivity. Over time, it becomes harder to distinguish between what feels good and what is right, between what is convenient and what is purposeful. Then momentum begins to slow. Progress that once came naturally now feels forced. Doors that used to open with ease require excessive effort. Things don't completely stop, but they don't flow either. This is one of the most deceptive stages because people often respond by pushing harder instead of realigning. They increase effort while ignoring direction, not realizing that momentum is sustained by obedience, not activity. As momentum fades, confidence starts to erode, not confidence in abilities, but confidence in timing and direction. You begin to question whether you heard God correctly in the past. Doubt creeps in quietly, reshaping your expectations downward. You start settling for less, not because you believe less is all that exists, but because reaching for more feels risky without clarity. This is how calling becomes muted without ever being revoked. Protection is the next thing people fail to notice slipping away, not in obvious danger, but in subtle exposure. You become vulnerable to distractions, unhealthy attachments, and unnecessary battles. Situations that once wouldn't touch you now drain you. Conversations that once had no power now influence your emotions. This is not abandonment. It is distance created by misalignment. Protection flows most freely where obedience exists. Over time, relationships are affected as well. Some connections weaken without explanation. Favor with certain people shifts. Support becomes inconsistent. This is often blamed on others, but spiritual alignment influences relational stability more than most people realize. When direction is ignored, alignment with the right people becomes harder to maintain. The most dangerous part of gradual loss is that life still looks functional. You're not falling apart. You're not failing publicly. Everything appears fine, which makes it easy to justify inaction. But underneath the surface, something essential is draining. Like a slow leak, it goes unnoticed until the damage is significant. God allows this gradual process not to harm, but to warn. Each stage is an invitation to return, to listen again, to realign before loss becomes permanent. Ignoring instruction doesn't remove calling, but it delays fulfillment. It doesn't erase destiny, but it complicates the path. The tragedy is not everything disappears instantly, but that it disappears quietly while people convince themselves nothing is wrong. This is why responsiveness matters. Obedience preserves what effort cannot. Alignment protects what talent alone cannot sustain. When instruction is ignored, loss does not come as punishment, it comes as consequence. And consequences, once fully matured, are far harder to reverse than they are to prevent.